Hey there, it's Pete Thorn. Welcome to my studio and welcome to another Wednesday Q&A. This is where I answer the questions you ask me by sending me an email to my Facebook music page. It's facebook.com/guitarnerd. If you go there and send me a question, I'll get to it as soon as I can, one of these videos. Really sorry I've been gone for a few weeks and haven't gotten one of these done. I totally slacked off on Wednesdays. Actually, I've been really busy just trying to get some other work done and rehearsing and stuff like that for a tour. So anyway, had a little bit of time this Wednesday, so I got back to it. And I'm going to answer a bunch of questions right now. So I'm going to start off with Ray Scranton. He's asking about multi-effects pedals. He says, can I recommend a decent multi-effects pedal for sub $300 or $400? He'd like to make it very clear that he doesn't need anything that models distortion or amps, just strictly for time-based effects. My solution for that is the Eventide H9. I believe they're $399, so that falls in your $300 to $400 category. They start at $399. Such a cool pedal, does everything you could possibly want, everything under the sun, and there's algorithms in it that will do multi-effects. So you can have, like, say, a reverb, a delay, some modulation, all that happening at the same time within the H9. You would be hard-pressed to find a better solution than the Eventide H9. So yeah, I'm going to make that my recommendation. Okay, moving on. Roman has a question about scales. He says he's a big fan from Poland. Thanks. Appreciate it. He's just wondering what are the most common sort of scales that I find useful and that I use on a regular basis. Well, the pentatonics, both major and minor. As far as, obviously a major scale and then the modes of the major scale, I play a lot in like Mixolydian and obviously the major scale Ionian mode, Mixolydian, Dorian, Aeolian. I find the most use for those, I guess. A while ago I actually did a 5-minute lesson and it's on my YouTube channel under the guitar lesson playlist. And the 5-minute lesson was on sort of the hybrid scale that I end up playing out of a lot, which is basically some sort of combination of Dorian mode, Mixolydian, and pentatonic scales, I guess, and the blues scale. So you can check that out and kind of see sort of, I break it down, show you kind of all the different notes and yeah, what I use sort of chromatically, and then also target notes and things like that. So yeah, that's a good lesson to watch, I guess, for scale choices. Okay, Zach wants to know about effects loops and using stereo guitar rigs. So he says that he's wanting to use a stereo guitar rig in a heavy metal situation. He typically runs delay and reverb in the effects loop of his mono rig of his amp, I guess, in a mono rig. How would you go about setting up a stereo rig with high gain amps using their effects loops? Well, like what I do is I have 2 of my PT100s in stereo, and basically all you do is you come out of the effects end of your main amp and you go into your effects, and then you come stereo out of whatever the last effect is and go into the effect returns of 2 different amplifiers. So like on my PT100, I'm coming back into the effect return on the main one, and then I just simply go into the effect return of a second PT100. The only controls that work on the amp then are all the power amp stuff, like the presence control, the loop master that's on the back of the PT100, the depth switch, all that works, but none of the channel controls work on the front or anything. But essentially the sort of the brain for your tone is the preamp of the first amp. You're sending out of that, going into your stereo effects, getting some stereo stuff processed. You're coming back stereo out of those into the 2 returns of both amps, and now you've got a stereo sound. You just want to hard pan them in the mix if you want a stereo kind of thing. Now, if you're just playing with no stereo effects going on, or effects are bypassed, it'll still just be like a mono sound coming out of both amps. So what you want to do is, in the mix, be it front of house or in-ears or whatever you're doing, you want to set them up so the volume is exactly the same coming out of both amps with no effects going on or anything like that. So that way you've got both amps balanced, so the sound man can help you with that, or you can do it yourself in your in-ears if you're using in-ear monitors. And then when you turn on some stereo effects, you'll be able to get some ambience going and have some stuff bouncing around in the stereo field, which is really fun. So that's pretty much how you do it. Yeah, it's the same for any genre, be it metal or anything. I would say that some of the the effects choices you're going to make, probably if you're a metal player, are going to be different. The other thing is, if you're in a band with 2 guitar players, many times, like, the sound man's going to want to pan you out a little bit anyway. So it's like, I always sort of, I'm still to this day sort of somewhat confused about, like, well, if I'm giving them a stereo signal, but I'm getting panned right anyway, what's the point, you know? But a large part of me using a stereo rig is really for my own enjoyment, both on stage when I'm hearing the cabinets behind me, and especially in in-ears. I really moved to a stereo rig because I had to do some touring gigs where I was using in-ears, and I hated that mono guitar sound, like, you know, just a straight up the middle or maybe panned a bit to one side. It's just so weird. It's like not a very accurate or true representation of what a guitar sounds like in a room. So that really bothered me. I started using some stereo rigs and stereo effects largely for my own enjoyment. In my in-ears, I was able to get some space and some stuff bouncing around and stuff that made it a lot more fun. So I really was very selfish, but yeah, at the end of the day, it's all about you enjoying playing, and that way your audience will enjoy what you play more, I think. So anyway, that's my thinking on stereo rigs. Really makes sense to use a stereo rig if you're the only guitar player in a band. You know, when you think about a band like Van Halen or something, Ed Van Halen's run stereo for a long time live. Well, it totally makes sense because, of course, he can have a, you know, stereo delay bouncing around or whatever he's got going. And when you've just got guitar, bass, drums, it totally makes sense. But yeah, if you're in a big band with keyboards or, you know, two guitar players, it's maybe, I don't know, 6 of one, half dozen the other, whether or not a stereo rig really makes any sense or not. I'm not really sure. I ask myself these questions. Okay, so next up we've got David, and he wants to know about some of my favorite impulse responses. What do I like to use these days? I use the Ownhammer impulses a lot, and my favorite Ownhammer impulses as of late are generally his 66 Marshall 212 collection, where he put out a collection a while ago where it was like a bunch of different speakers that he did all in this closed back Marshall 212 cabinet, and I love that collection. It's just awesome. Now my favorites in there are the Blackback M 55 hertz speaker. Okay, so it's a 1977 Celestion Blackback G12M 55 hertz bass cone type speaker, and I love that speaker. It's a real go-to for me. So those are some of my favorites, as well as he's got a speaker called it's a pre-roll 20 watt greenback. He labels it PR20, I believe, in his collections. That thing sounds great, both in the 212 Marshall collection, as well as he's got a 412 oversized Marshall TV style cabinet that he did some impulse response collections with, and yeah, the PR20 and the 412 TV style cabinet, check that out as well. It's just like a really, really great sort of kind of meat and potatoes greenback sound. Real warm and woody, and has that great thing that we love about greenbacks. Okay, oh, I also use the, many times for clean tones, I use the Alnico Silver in the 66 Marshall 212. Once again, yeah. Okay, Mato says that, what's this? He's got two questions. He says he's looking for some basic application of reverbs. Can you tell me what my two go-to reverb sound presets would be? Well, I like to have a nice spring reverb on clean sounds for kind of like a vibey, you know, sort of retro, sort of clean sound. Think Fender spring reverb in a Fender amp sort of thing. I love that sound, so I generally have a spring dialed up. And then I'll also maybe sometimes use a hull or a plate and roll off a lot of top end. And so it's just like a real warm ambience, and that's usually with a longer tail than the spring. And I'll have that like on deck as well to use for certain clean sounds. Don't tend to use reverb on distorted sounds very much. It's mainly on cleans or semi-cleans. But yeah, nice spring and a nice hull or plate. And on the springs I tend to roll off a lot of high end as well. Keep them dark, and it keeps them, you know, you can turn up the mix then, get a fair amount of reverb going, but it's not like, you know, overtaking the guitar sound or anything, as long as you roll off a lot of top end on the reverb. And his question number 2 was basic application for delays. What would be my go-to delay? Well, once again, I like them kind of dark. So whatever kind of delay you decide to use, be it you know, digital delay or tape delay or analog delay, I like to roll off high end. So I like delays that give you the option of doing that. One real standard sound for me is I set up a stereo delay where I've got an 1/8 note repeat on one side and a 1/4 note on the other side, and So you get this kind of like stereo bouncing around thing, and I just blend that in a little bit. I usually have my delay on an expression pedal, so I like to be able to have a delay whenever I want it and just blend it in via an expression pedal as I see fit. And it's generally that stereo thing. And think like 250 milliseconds on one side and 500 on the other. That's where I'll start, but then I'll have a tap tempo delay so I can tap in the time and lock it to kind of whatever tune I'm playing, and I've got that stereo delay thing happening. So that's my standard kind of sound. I usually roll off some lows too, like on my Strymon timeline I'll roll off lows up to about 160 hertz or something like that, and then I'll roll off the top end all the way down to like 2 or 3K or something like that, and warm it right up so that it's really sits in the background and gives you a nice ambience without overtaking the core guitar sound. As far as other delays, sometimes on solos I like either just a straight up eighth note delay or a straight up quarter note delay, and I tend to use in my Strymon timeline, I use the tape delay setting a lot, just because I like that sort of imperfect kind of delay with a bit of the wow and flutter or whatever on it. And if I'm soloing with a distorted tone, I'll either use a tape delay like that or sometimes a digital delay, but once again with the high end roll off, just depends on the sound. What else? The other type of sort of main sort of core delay I love is that Memory Man thing, like the Edge, where you've got some vibrato on the delay, and it's real dark analog sound, but with some beautiful kind of either chorusing or vibrato going on the repeats. And that's really nice for cleans or semi-cleans and kind of, textural ambient sort of guitar parts. Okay, last question for today. Darren wants to know if I had $1,500 and I had to put together a guitar rig, like guitar, amp, effects, everything, what would I get? Well, I would say that for a guitar, first of all, I'd look used for most of these things because you can obviously get a better deal. For a guitar, I would probably find some sort of Fender Strat, like a Super Strat kind of thing with 2 single coils and a humbucker in the bridge. I used to have a great one. It was like a made in Japan, mid-90s kind of made in Japan Strat. It was sunburst. And yeah, 2 single coils and a humbucker. It had Floyd Rose. It was just like a Super Strat kind of gigging guitar. Had a great neck, as I remember. Really good solid guitar. So I'd probably try and find something like that for, in the $500 range used or something. Maybe a made in Mexico one or made in Japan one or something. And yeah, so that would take care of the guitar. And then I would say, as far as an amp goes, I used to have a Marshall DSL 50 many moons ago, and it was like a really good solid gigging tool. Just a basic 2-channel amp. It had a good, decent clean channel and a decent lead channel. It wasn't like the best sounding amp or anything, but it was good and workable. So maybe go that route. Try and find one of those for like $600 or something. And then with the leftover money for effects, I would probably get. I guess you'd need a speaker cabinet too. That might put us over budget. But anyway, let's just pretend it doesn't. For effects, I would get an Eventide H9, I think, because that's just a great box to have as a multi-effects thing that'll cover just about all the bases except for distortion. And then I might get like maybe a TS9 type of some sort, and like basic good solid tube screamer, and maybe like an OCD. 2 great pedals that are very different and kind of cover a lot of overdrive and distortion needs. And then just a good tuner like a Polytune or a Boss TU3, something like that, and you'd be all done. That's all you'd need really to do like a ton of work, I would think. I could gig with that setup, no problem. All right, thanks for all your questions, and hey, I'm really sorry once again that I haven't been on the ball and getting these done every Wednesday. I will make an effort to do it each week, and I really appreciate you guys coming back and hanging in there with me and watching these videos. I appreciate that anybody cares what I'm doing at all. So once again, thanks so much, and hit subscribe if you haven't, and come back and see me often for lessons and these Q&As and all kinds of videos. More Tim and Pete's Guitar Show videos coming up real soon. We're working on those. All right, so take care. Have a great week. I'll see you next Wednesday. Over and out.